Welcome to Extra Takes, hosted by Northland Church Senior Pastor, Dr. Joshua Laxton. Join us each week as Pastor Josh reveals the rest of the story behind his sermons. We'll discuss how those who follow Christ can live out a biblical vision for the church in our world today.
Well, hello, Northland family and friends. Welcome to another episode of Extra Takes. I am your co-host, Matt Shiles, and I'm joined with my trusty sidekick, Pastor Josh Laxton. That was a good wave. Welcome.
I know that's what you do.
Good job. You did my role well.
The signature Matt. Signature Matt move. Nice little wave.
Yep. Well,
howdy.
We're not in the same room.
No, I'm getting away for the week. A week of rest and relaxation. Now, how I'm going to do with it, I don't know. I try to do well, but just a lot of things on my mind that I'm trying to work through in a good way.
A couple weeks ago, you said you can rest like the best of them.
Well, I did say that, and I can. We'll just see how we'll see how I fare this week.
All right, we'll get a report card. But yeah, we're so glad to do this today. But we're glad that you were away and resting and spending family time. So we're gonna dig into it today because this was the second week of our A&E series, Forged in the Fight, and you decided just to focus all on boxing movies, man. You are
all on boxing.
How about that? 3 out of 4 movies, boxing.
Yeah, I mean, and I've never boxed a day in my life. So here you go. Well, I never played hockey a day in my life.
You know,
I mean, I played I don't know what they call it. I didn't play field hockey, but we actually had a hockey puck. I remember in middle school. In the gym, street hockey, and it was no rollerblades though. So it was. You had the stick, you had all of that. I really enjoyed that. That was fun. That was fun in middle school.
Because like we learned last week, you have a low center of gravity.
I have a low center of gravity. But that was during the days of Mighty Ducks. If you remember Mighty Ducks. So I would do a knuckle puck. I would. So what was his name? Fuller. Anyway. No. Who hit the long shots in Mighty Ducks?
Woolman? Oh.
I can't remember. Man, I see his face.
My childhood friends are going to be very disappointed if they hear this because they will know this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course we grew up in the same generation, and Mighty Ducks was big. But yeah, I do have a question to start us off in honor of you getting away. So I believe you're at the beach. So what is your favorite thing to do at the beach?
Sit and just look at the ocean and probably doze off.
Wow. Nothing active, really.
Well, no, because I'm active all of the time. So this is where, like you said, was my favorite. Now, one of the things that I did see yesterday, I've never seen this before, but windsurfing. Like I've heard of it, but I actually saw 2 people windsurf, and I'm like, now that looks like fun, and I bet that is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, well, there's definite things that I don't want to say could go wrong, but I mean, you got some sharks out there. You could face plant on the sand, which could be hard, hurt you.
Yeah.
But it looked fun because some of those guys were riding the waves, and I mean, they were flying high in the air.
Yeah.
And then coming back down. I'm like, oh, that would be fun. That would be fun.
I like good old boogie boarding.
Boogie board, yeah. I'm too old to do boogie boarding anymore. Body surfing. Oh, like no, I'll fall and hurt myself.
No, that's skimboarding.
Oh, what's boogie boarding?
Like body surfing, but with a board.
Oh, okay.
I agree though. Skimboarding though, can't do that. No way. No. Fall harder than
I'm playing all of the ways in my mind that I would fall and get hurt.
Yep.
So.
All right, so let's refocus on this week. Movie about these last 2, or a question about these last 2 weekends. Of all the 4 movies you highlighted.
Yep.
Miracle, Cinderella Man, Rocky IV, and Creed II. Which one would you choose as your favorite? You had to watch that movie over and over, and you couldn't watch any of the others ever again.
Cinderella Man.
See, okay, so I watched it this weekend. I watched it on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm ashamed that I hadn't watched it before. It's so good.
Yeah,
Just a little tear coming down.
I mean, yeah. Especially when he wins and May goes crazy. Like, not only did he not die, he won, and
The reaction was the best.
yeah. See, that's part of that common grace element of acting. So Renee's yeah. So I mean, I think she does an incredible job acting.
Yeah. I think so too.
I mean, Russell Crowe's a really good actor, I think, but I mean, just that, that particular scene, I thought that was special.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Okay, so Cinderella Man, you wouldn't choose Miracle, wouldn't choose Rocky.
You said if I had to watch it over and over and over, and I would say and how I picked that is that if I've watched that over and over and over. I've watched Miracle over and over and over, but I'm more Cinderella Man. And Rocky, that's a great movie to pull out every now and then. Because again, what happens, and I've seen it so many times now by, doing this series that I'm like, okay. Now, Creed it made me go back and watch the first Creed again. And, because it's been a while since I've watched the first Creed.
Yeah.
And, I do believe it's a great story arc about identity, because it shows him like he was like, when I say an orphan in the foster care system because his mom, died. And so that's Creed 1. And then Apollo Creed's wife comes in the scene and basically adopts him when he's, 12, 13 years old. But he struggles with who he is because he didn't know his father. He didn't even know that his dad was Creed until she comes and, kind of, invites him to live with her. And so you could see, and then even in the second one, there's the struggle. And then even the third one, because there's 3 Creeds. And in the third one, his past comes back to haunt him. And again, it's this identity, thing of who he is. And actually, it does seem like that movie, particularly in the message this past weekend, resonated with a lot of people. Like Persevering, it does resonate with, almost everybody out there. But I think in terms of the most, kind of poignant, kind of potent, powerful message, I think hit a lot of people on the identity part because they were able to see a double-minded element of identity and you just don't see that when we talk about identity in the Christian life. But here's a movie that depicts this guy struggling with his identity and what it leads to. And I think it was very powerful for people this past weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way you kicked off this weekend was before we dug into Rocky 4 and looked at Creed 2, you gave us this a bit of these points to consider in terms of what to consume. So we talked about it a little bit last week on the podcast, but you had set it up in the message of you at least got one question about this, kind of wrestling with how do we discern, what are some questions to ask and how do we filter out what to consume. And you talked about the law of liberty just leads it a bit wide. You gave us some points of when to turn it off, and then some points of, you called it consuming A&E and 3D. This is where you talked about, pointing out sin and evil. You talked about common grace and then special grace. So I'd love for you to share just a little bit of how you went about kind of formulating that section of what to consume and how it kind of was created.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, years ago I did, and this is before I even got to Northland, did a series on the gray areas of life. So gray matters. So gray matters, and kind of spinning off two ways of gray matters, talking about it, and then gray matters. And and really anchoring it in 1 Corinthians, where Paul talks about eating meat offered to idols, is that here's a gray area, and this gray area does matter, and that there is liberty to eat meat offered to idols, but then he gives some caveats of when it's not okay to eat meat offered to idols. And that's really an important passage for Christians to understand the law of liberty in Christ. So that's what liberty, the law of liberty is. It's liberty not in the sense that we're just free to do whatever we want to do, but it's freedom in Christ, that there's not legalism, but there is wisdom. So that's a big distinction, is that there's not legalism, but there's wisdom. Whereas in the Old Testament, you had all of these laws. You had 614 laws, and not to say that it got legalistic per se, but people were driven, to legalism. So, and what I mean by that is what you see in what scholars refer to as the intertestamental time, and that's the 400 years of silence, basically between Nehemiah, Malachi, and Matthew, is the intertestamental period where this is where the religious sects like the Pharisees and like the Sadducees rose. And the Pharisees would take the law, and then they would build out their own set of laws. So in some sense, the law was driven to legalism of a lot of don'ts. You can't do this, can't do this, can't do this, can't do this. And so, Jesus comes on the scene and fulfills the law of Moses, and really abolishes the legalistic religiosity of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And then what you see with Paul is, okay, what does it mean to live in Christ? What does it mean to live this life that is glorifying to King Jesus, and still navigate some of the complexities of, well, we just don't know. I mean,
Right.
what in these areas of like meat offered to idols, we just don't know, because
Yeah.
I can eat meat offered to idols, and I'm not even thinking about Zeus or Apollos or Dionysus. I mean, I'm just thinking of, man, this meat's good, and I'm glorifying God through eating meat. Because Paul would say, whatever you eat or drink, whatever you do for the glory of God. So that's where it comes from, and then because I would definitely say that people would probably disagree with my openness to watching and listening to things, But I think those three principles of when to turn it off, I think those are significant. I think those give enough kind of extended boundaries that it gives you. It gives you wisdom, because I do think I think this is where you need to be honest with yourself, and obviously with the Lord, that if I'm watching something that makes me lust and long for and to sin, you ought to cut it off. I remember, and then like the second one is it begins to influence me in bad ways. And then the Spirit of God convicts me. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was watching a TV series, and one of the things that I did, at least one of the things that drew me to this series is, it was a comedy, but it was kind of like a dark comedy, and it allowed me to see, when I say the darkness of humanity, it allowed me to, in some sense, see depravity, and how this kind of dark comedy depicted, human beings. So it started out by almost like a research in what the world is finding, when I say entertaining and almost normalizing sin, just so that I could kind of be aware of, this was a well-known show, and I just wanted. But here's what happened: is the more I watched it, the more I found myself being entertained by the sinful elements of it, and I'm like, okay, I got to turn that off, because that's not glorifying to Christ. And so that's where I believe the Spirit of God convicted me. And so I've not watched that, kind of that show since, because I started finding myself laughing at things that God would not laugh at, that would break his heart. And so that's just an example of how listen, I need to turn it off. I didn't see anything wrong with it at the beginning, but where I was taking it as a human being, I thought, okay, that's not healthy. So, yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting what you said about just even those 3 points about turning it off and how some may disagree with the openness. I do think it's helpful when you give us this framework for all of us then to really to put the ball into our court in terms of this is a discipleship activity, and for us to work on our honing our discernment skills and really being more in tune with how is the Spirit moving in you, and then even if you're watching with your friends, family, or a spouse, is there even a humility for you to then defer if there's something that they see discernment wise? Hey, I think we should turn it off, right? Are you going to be stubborn about it, or are you going to defer and say, hey, I don't struggle with this, or I don't see this as maybe a blind spot, but I'm going to defer to you and we're going to turn it off?
Yeah. Well, and there's probably several more principles I could have added to turn it off, because you bring up with you bring up a situation if you're watching it with somebody else. That you do have you need to turn it off if that those particular elements may not be healthy or beneficial to somebody younger or even a younger believer. So you do have, because that goes back to the meat offered to idols, is that if it causes your brother, basically sister, to stumble, to kind of succumb, to temptation, then I'm not going to do that. And so I was really just kind of using, because I didn't have a lot of time. So I was really just trying to use it more of a personal element. But yeah, I mean, if you add the community element where obviously if you're a parent and you got kids in there, well, you're going to be a little bit more strict and wise in terms of what you watch with them there. Because, I remember years ago, our kids were younger and I had Goonies on. Like, I love Goonies. I mean, Goonies is my generation, your generation. And so I'm watching Goonies, and Johnny's like, you got to turn that off. Caleb's right here. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. Well, it has cuss words in it. So, at that point, I think Caleb was like 12. And so, yeah, he doesn't know, really the right way, the wrong way to talk, or, hey, we don't use those words. So yeah, I mean, I needed to be wiser. I'm like, well, because listen, I ain't going to go around saying all of this, so I'm not going to do what Chunk would do. So yeah.
It is interesting the way you will watch something when you have younger eyes and ears, next to you. And even for me, like watching sports, having the girls watch sports with me, it really highlights. I mean, commercials. I mean, we're constantly turning the volume off and then having them look away for commercials. Even, a scary movie trailer will come up, and all sorts of other things that we just don't want them to watch, and things that I'll even be able to model and say, hey, I'm looking away too. I don't want to watch or hear this as well. And it's just a way to for us to do it together. And it's interesting. We kind of just find ourselves naturally doing some of these things, but it's a way to disciple them. It's a way to say, hey, this is, as a family and, as followers of Jesus, there's some things that we just don't do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. I had another question about that. So you talked about common grace and then special grace, and how really moving from common to special grace is that what this series is about? Is that what this series is teaching? We're able to kind of watch things, point out the common grace, but then really to do the deeper, harder work to pull out some of the special grace elements.
Yeah, I mean that's what we've done in every A&E series. Going all the way back to Hamilton.
Yeah.
And we would take those songs and we would see the common grace elements in there, but we would make a beeline to the special grace of where it's anchored. And then, with new songs, same humanity, same thing. But here's the thing with even that series, we're pointing out sin and evil, and we're showing how it's bad. But then also we're taking these common grace elements and we're again anchoring them into Scripture. The death and resurrection of Jesus. Inside Out was same thing. That's why we were looking at emotions through the lens of the gospel.
Yeah.
And then again this year, and sports movies makes it really kind of easy to take some common grace elements. I mean, these movies, and maybe some people, maybe a lot of people will go, well, I did have multiple people come up to me. I've watched those movies. I didn't get that from that movie, but that was awesome. And so, because we don't know, this is why I want to teach people, here's how you watch movies. Man, see those things, because if it stirred your heart for some reason, there's a reason why it stirred it. So
Right.
special grace tells you why it stirred your heart. Common grace would go, man, that moved me. That was inspirational. Special grace actually anchors the reality of that. And so,
Wow.
yeah, and so that's where, like, because if you take like Rocky and Creed and like so those are fictitious characters. And then you have Cinderella Man Nod based on a true story, Miracle based on a true story. Sure, there will always be people who just rise above. And, again, that because that's just how they're in some sense built. But the reason why these stories move us is because we were made for more. We were made to persevere. We were made to find our true identity. We were made to long. Well, I mean, I would say let's put it this way. I don't know. I would say humanity was made for living hope. I mean, living hope came about because we broke covenant with God. We broke relationship with God. So therefore, we needed a living hope. So that's Cinderella Man. But that's where when we watch something like that, where this guy is living out hope, we're like, yes, I wish I had that. Well, you can have that in Jesus. Unity. I mean, when a nation was fracturing in the late 70s, 1980, when they had nothing to unify them, here is a team behind the scenes that's going through hell, from a coaching standpoint and training standpoint to actually forge unity. And so when you see that, you're like, oh my God, oh my gosh, and I'm like, yes, like we were made for unity in our diversity. And so, but that's where anchoring it into the revelation, the special revelation of what is revealed in God's word, anchored in the person of Jesus, is that special grace component. And that's what I'm trying to do, is help us understand in arts and entertainment that, man, we can use this as a discipleship tool to think biblically, Christianly, and redemptively.
Yeah, that's so good. It's a good reminder of the purpose of not just this series, but all the series that we've done. And like you said, you're a one-trick pony.
I'm a one-trick pony. That's it. Well, that's where he's like, maybe I'll do an A&E series on Alone, because that's a fun series where you are absolutely alone.
It's the survival series, yeah.
And it's a survival series, but it's so, like, because I watch even that show.
Oh yeah,
I watch it through the lens of special grace.
Absolutely. You learn about the human condition. You learn about our need for community. You learn about
sacrifice. You learn about calories. You learn about you learn about a lot of things that
identity.
Yeah,
man, there's so much there.
What taps you out,
Yeah, and really you don't really know until you go through it. Some people are like, oh, I'm gonna last a while. They're there like 48 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that they didn't bring the right thing with them, because I mean, so there's so many things,
Interesting.
But again, I really I know it sounds nerdy, but this is how I watch stuff.
How do you balance not being that like annoying, overly Christian Christianizing everything person. How do you balance that? Because I could see some like, hey, everything we're watching is just, we're always, pulling things out. But like, help us understand how you process and balance that.
Yeah, I mean, here's what, and let's see if it makes sense to you. If it makes sense to you, maybe it will make sense to other people.
Okay.
So I think there's a difference. I think there is a difference between letting Jesus be the filter of everything that we do, everything that we consume, everything that we create, because again, we want to do everything for His glory. And everything, here's the thing, everything that you engage with doesn't have to come from a Christian. It doesn't have to have a fish emblem on it. It doesn't have to be, filtered through the International Christian Film Festival saying, hey, you ought to watch it. Like it doesn't. But everything that we do, we're bringing it under the lordship of Christ. So there's a difference between that, and there's a difference. There's difference between that and like force feeding people Jesus nonstop. Well, you can't do that. Well, you can't do that. And it's like legalism, because that's where you overwhelm people and that's where you shame people, is that you can't do that. Why'd you listen to that? I can't believe that you would watch that movie. Good night. Who do you think you are? I think that's the overbearing, where what I'm trying to do is go, there might even be some things questionable that you watch or that you listen to, but will you let Jesus filter you there?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And if I would have to summarize, there's a difference in the way you engage culture, right? Yeah. And I think there can be from what my question was, I think often, when we view everything and through Christianese, there is an attempt to just avoid anything that's not Christian, right? I'm only going to listen to Christian songs. I'm only going to listen to Christian movies. And what you're teaching us is, no, actually, we can enter into the things of the world, but we can do it with wisdom and discernment, and we can consider how those things can be redeemed.
Yeah. And I think this one, like even this summer of looking at faith in sports and looking at these movies, I think people are catching it. I mean, this is just the fourth year of me doing this, but I think people are catching it because I've had several conversations. Like, I've never thought about sports that way. Well, we're not just called to willy-nilly our way to just playing sports like the world. Yeah. Is competition good? Absolutely. Is sports part of the creation cultural mandate? Absolutely. But from a Christian perspective and a worldview, we actually engage differently. And there is a redemptive component, or it should be a redemptive component to how Christians engage that sphere of society. And that's why we wanted to launch our institution of sports for missional engagement, because we want to begin to live this out in a different way, because I do think that the world puts so much pressure on us that in some sense, it's kind of like we either got to be all in the world, or we can't play with them. And I'm like, okay, no, there's got to be a third way. There's got to be another way of doing it, of being able to compete, but even showing so think about it. You can think about it in this way. So in God's economy, you only work 6 days and you rest a seventh day. Well, in all of these other cultures, they're working 7 days a week. And the whole premise and the foundation is that if you do things according to God's economy, if you do things according to God's kingdom, His rule and reign, you will experience flourishing even more so than the world and the way they do it, even if they do it more days than you do. Like because God wants to show the distinction between people who live under His rule and reign and those who don't. So I apply that to the realm of sports and go, if you think that you've got to spend $40,000 a year or $20,000 a year or $40,000 throughout your kids' childhood to get them to be excellent at this sport, then you may be trusting more into your money and the training than you are trusting in the God who's calling you to do X, Y, Z. And so that's where I want us to get back to. I want us to get back to, what does it mean to trust God in the world, in every area of life, to make sure that every area of life we are stewarding it appropriately. It's what it's one of those points that I was talking about, is that when pride, when you have pride, it does lead to destruction, and it leads to damage. And so that's where, when you look at faith in sports and you see all of this kind of destruction and damage in adolescents and teenagers around sports and what it's doing, how do we bring sports in a competitive sense under the rule and reign of God, where there is more functionality and flourishing rather than floundering? Because when we do things God's way, there is health. And that's what we're trying to even show in the sense of even these movies, and how it even depicts that.
Yeah, well said. So let's look at that first movie, Rocky IV, and this was about perseverance. The main point was the world, the flesh, and the devil may win a few rounds, but Christ in you wins the war. I think this is an important caveat. If it's just us fighting, I promise you, you will lose. But Christ in me, he is the hope of glory, and he has won the war. So it's interesting to think about this idea of who is in our corner, but the reality of Jesus is actually not just supporting us, but he's actually fought for us, and he already won the war. And you gave us several truths from this movie. That first one, wilderness prepares you for war. That one seemed to resonate with many people. And you gave us this principle: the wilderness isn't a wasteland; it is a land of preparation. You share a little bit more about that, and some encouragement if people are finding themselves in that area right now.
Yeah, I believe this, why this movie, and particularly Rocky getting away, and he's done this before when he's training for a big fight. He's got to get away, and he does things just differently, and that's why he was doing the same thing with Creed that he'd done in his own life. Right. Is that you got to get away. And in my own life, I would say between 17 and 37, so 20 years was a wilderness period for me in ministry. There were some highs, but there were a lot of lows. I mean, we experienced some really hurtful, toxic churches. I was learning too about me, even as a young man in ministry. Leading ministry, pastoring at a very young age. So I'm learning a lot of from my own inexperience and failure. But I see all of that wilderness, that 20 years of kind of wilderness journey, kind of when I say wilderness journeying, where there is this barrenness sometimes, where there's this dryness, where I'm like, Lord, what in the world are you doing? Where I'm like, man, why am I here? All I want to do is like serve you. But then when I look back on that kind of 20-year period, it was a place that toughened me. It was a place that deepened me. It was a place that pruned me. It tested me. What's truly in here? Do I truly love Christ? And do I truly believe? It was the testing of a call, because when you have that many hard knocks, and that's where, when you look at Rocky, it's that wilderness, the way he prepared, it was truly testing him if this is really what he's called to do. It was not easy. So that's when I look back in 20 years from 17 to 37. I mean, it truly was a time period of shaping and forming and molding. Not to say that it isn't now, but I mean, when I would go to these churches and, a year later I'd be gone. Those were hard in so many different ways. And so now when I look at, when I look at my life now, almost, 44, and then from the time I was at Wheaton in 2019 to now, I'm like, God seems to really be taking everything that he did in those 20 years of kind of wilderness preparation, because that was even the PhD. You talking about hard? I mean, you got to withdraw, right? I mean, you got to study. You got to, I'm like,
Right.
all of those, all of those years of preparation. That wasn't a wasteland. It really was a formation period, that those hard seasons were used to forge and form something, that God was going to ultimately do something in and through me. And that's where I see, right, and I'm seeing all the writing on the wall, even over the last 4 years, of God converging things in my life, of what he had done in me in that 20-year period, to now what he's actually, by all accounts, seeing what he wants to do through me as I'm at Northland, and that's exciting. And so it's like I'm in the ring, like Rocky was, with Drago, but that wasteland was not a wasteland. Even though there was times where I'm like, what the heck? What? I don't think. Yeah, I don't think this. I don't think this is the way it should be. So,
Right. Yeah, and what I'm hearing from that is the wilderness isn't pointless, and there's tremendous purpose in that, and it's hard to see that in the wasteland. But then as you are out of it, some of those things, as you said, may start converging. And I talked to a congregate that was, man, they resonated with this point so deeply. They're like, we're there. But I think there can be such a hope in realizing that this isn't pointless. This is a land of preparation. It won't always be like this, right?
Yeah.
Life's always going to be hard, right? But this is different. A land of barrenness, a land of fruitlessness, seemingly, like a land of just challenge after challenge without any kind of end in sight.
Well, that's why the wilderness is a land of testing. You are testing what is in you, and what is in you is in your heart and in your mind. So if you think about, take his heart because you got more heart and no pain, that is a mentality. And Paul teaches that is that our present suffering is not worth comparing to the weight of glory. That's a mindset. So that's where your heart and your mind are really connected. And so the wilderness wandering, the wilderness season, it really is testing what is in it. It's like my training for endurance is like, so when I'm going on these 2-hour runs, 2.5-hour bike rides, it's the mindset. It's kind of, okay, I'm forming something in here. I'm testing my heart capacity. I'm testing my mind capacity I can do this. I can. I've been preparing. And so when I actually get into the race, like, I'm going back to actually the wilderness. I'm going back to the land of preparation and going, okay, listen, we've been here before and we got through it and we can get through this. Okay. So, that's why wilderness is so important. And you do see it throughout the scriptures. Even the wandering in the wilderness for the people of Israel. Now, it was judgmental in the sense of the older generation had to pass away, but it was also formational for the younger generation coming through and going into the promised land. So they would always be able to go back. You see what God did. You see what God did. You see what God did, even when we were wandering for 40 years.
Yeah. And when you are, when you're put under that pressure and you're tested and you see what comes out, it's not always fun to see what comes out. But I think that's also helpful to recognize as the wilderness being a land of preparation, even when you're squeezed and things come out that aren't desirable, they are for a purpose.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. And if people seen Creed 2, so this is where, Rocky takes him out in the desert, very similar to wilderness, but it actually plays a different role for him. It's a place of rebirth, and because he says this is a place where fighters go to be reborn. Yeah. But it's very similar. and he's punching these tires, and there's a scene where it shows his bloody knuckles, and he's taking an ice bath, and he puts his hands in there. So even in those seasons, man, you got a lot of cuts. You got a lot of scrapes. But here's what's happening is that training is in some sense like callousing, so to make you stronger and tougher for the fight ahead. So Rocky was taking him in a place where he was going to come out tougher. He was going to come out meaner. He was going to come out more durable. Because even when he's doing the whole neck lifting thing, he's like, you got to make your neck strong because you got to be able to take those blows. See, that's what happens in the wilderness. That's what happens in the desert. That's what happens in the barren place. You are toughened from an outward perspective, but you are softened inwardly because you are now sharper mentally.
Yeah. That was such a good point, and there were several other truths from Rocky 4. But let's move on to Creed 2, and this was all about identity and a few of the main points. An identity crisis happens when there's no stability with who you are and why you do what you do. And then your stability and security in life must be rooted in your identity in Christ. If we don't, we'll be unstable and double-minded. And you really contrasted, you pulled out this reality of identity with pride, and how big of a role pride played in his life. You said pride is the greatest culprit of identity theft. Pride leads to destruction. You said healing always moves from the inside out. Rebirth requires death before life, and your name drives you to victory. So I want us to look at, healing always moves from the inside out. You asked this question, how do I know inner healing is taking place? You walked us through kind of confession, vulnerability, forgiveness, reconciliation, redemption, and renewal. Talk a little bit more about that question and then some of those responses.
Yeah, I think when people go through a season where they're trying to figure out who they are, I think there's probably many thoughts that cross their mind, and that's why I like this movie, is that he's he's realizing that he doesn't want to own it at the very beginning. That's why I like that scene in the hospital room is so important, is because he's still bubbling up with pride, even though he's sitting there all bandaged and bruised. It's kind of like, bro.
Yeah, he can barely talk. Yeah.
Yeah. But you see how he's angry at Rocky. Well, why is he angry at Rocky? I mean, Rocky didn't do anything. Rocky told him not to take the fight. And he's coming there because he really does care for Creed, but he could not. And this is the thing I think is okay for those who play the role of mentor, coach, parent, that, hey, listen, if you've told your pupil, you told your boy, your girl, don't do this, this isn't healthy, and they want to go do it, you don't go do it with them because you're complicit in that. Now when they come, when they fall, like, he's there, because I care for you. But listen, I'm not going to be complicit in this because you're not answering the questions right. I'm not listening until you are in the right mind and you will listen, especially when you got something this serious, like fighting this is life and death, man. People die in the ring. Like, unless your head's right, like, I cannot go along with it. Okay. So I think again, that's even a point that, gosh, we could have been here for days. I could have really seriously, like, you could, but what I was trying to do is do an arc, but there's so many different clips in this, but
yeah.
So, but what you see with Creed though, is that, man, he's got to process this. He's got to process the butt whooping that he put himself in.
Yeah.
And you do see that, but you also see that with David in Psalm 51. He's processing the butt whooping that he has put himself into. Because he's gone through it as well, and he's the only one to blame. He's the only one to blame. And that's that. So that's where, when you go through a season where where you have fallen pretty significantly,
Yeah.
where there's been some kind of destruction, maybe a marriage went wrong, maybe bankruptcy, maybe an estrangement between you and between you and a loved one. But some like you've got to start processing it. What role did I play in that? Because in many situations, like you played a role. Like going back to my wilderness journey. So when I was young, and I was in the City of Refuge, which was kind of a ministry and a season for those pastors and families who had gone through just ministry, church hurt. I had a process. Where I wanted to kind of point all the fingers. Yeah, the toxic church, toxic leader, unhealthy people. Didn't. Sure, were those true? Yeah. However, what was also true is I had to process, well, what role did I play? Because even though they were unhealthy, what areas in my life were unhealthy that gave them this kind of ammunition that they grabbed a hold of as a toxic person to try to get rid of me. Well, I had to own that. So that's where confession, vulnerability, for forgiving them, and then that's where that all played a significant role. Because when I was young, as a younger pastor, there was an identity crisis, because I always tell people, when I was in my 20s, this is where, particularly in American culture or American evangelical culture, we celebrated the celebrity pastor. I think that's still around to a degree, but because there have been so many failures, of celebrity pastors, I think that's kind of at least, at least have kind of come down a notch, but nevertheless. And so I'm seeing all of these celebrity pastors, and go, well, I'm going to prove how good of a leader I am. Well, that's an identity crisis, because God doesn't want me to prove anything about how good of a leader I am.
Right.
That's not why he called me into ministry. Okay.
Yeah.
He called me into ministry to serve him, to serve his people, regardless of how good or how poor of a leader I am. That's what he called me. And so I actually had to walk through that in the City of Refuge to go, listen, my identity is not tied to my performance. My identity is not tied to how many people are coming to the church or how few are coming to the church. My identity is not tied to what people say about my preaching, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. My identity is tied to Jesus. But what I had to do, because I had allowed this kind of identity crisis to kind of creep into my youthful pastorates, I had to get to a place where I confessed, where I recognized, where now I leave from a place of vulnerability going like, listen, I know, man, I ain't all put together. I know that listen, I'm a human being, but listen, I ain't got anything to prove to you. My only aim in life is to know him and the power of his resurrection. I mean, that's Paul's words. And so that's where inner healing took place for me, which is part of the reason why I really believe. Now, you know this. I'm an intense person.
Oh, really?
Shut up. But yeah. Wait, but that's where I say, well, I'm an intense person. But at the end of the day, I'm not intense because I'm trying to prove something to somebody. Man,
No.
I'm intense because that's my personality and how God has wired me, and I just own it. But I'm intense over the fact that God has called me to make sure that we are mobilized for the glory of King Jesus as we advance his mission in the world. But I'm not intense because I got something to prove to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my intensity used to be, well, I'm trying to prove something to somebody. But but now I don't have anything to prove. This is just who God has made me, and I'm grateful that He's made me this way, because I know that He's wanting to do something, use me in a way that He wants to use me. But it's not because I'm trying to prove something.
Yeah, and that's where those points of confession and vulnerability, forgiveness, reconciliation, redemption, renewal. As you were illustrating those, all of those points you can lay out because you've gone through them yourself. And so much of what we've been talking about today is that you can so relate and resonate with all of this because you've experienced it. And as a leader, leaders that have experienced something, they can then guide others as they're in a similar process. The wilderness, need for inner healing, etc. So that's a great place for us to stop for today, unless you have anything else burning that you want to share from either of these two movies, or even just this series.
No, I mean, I don't have anything else, per se. I mean, I did have two other slides that I did. I got to them on Saturday. I didn't get it because I thought it didn't really add anything. I could, I believe that I tied it up verbally in terms of, your persevering power is Jesus, and your anchoring identity, it should be in Jesus. But it was interesting. So I'll leave us with this because again, I'm not a boxer. Never boxed a day in my life. But I was researching how boxers think through their 12 rounds.
Okay.
Now, because I don't know even when it changed from 15 rounds to 12 rounds, but if you noted in Cinderella Man, they go 15 rounds. And then for Rocky and Drago, they go 15 rounds, but Creed, they've moved it to 12 rounds. So, but here's how boxers think through the 12 rounds. So the first 3 rounds are the setup. This is where you're learning, adjusting, discovering. You're kind of in the battle. You're trying to figure these things out. Then rounds 4 through 6 is called the middle game. This is where you actually begin to apply what you've been doing in training, what you were doing in training. This is where you begin to apply your strategy, because there is this strategy that boxers have based upon their enemy. And then round 7 through 9 is what they call the shift. This is where, okay, man, you've gone half the match, the bout so far. So you're probably, getting tired. There's some fatigue setting in. You may have been, kind of knocked down. Maybe you're bruised at this point. And so this is where you have to start digging deep, going, okay, well, why am I here? If you got knocked down, hey, why are you getting back up, type thing. And then rounds 10 through 12 is called the championship round, or the championship rounds. And so this is kind of where our endurance really kicks in. So this is where now everything that you've done in training, it is kicking in, because you got to go the distance. The championship rounds, that's where champions are made, okay? But they're made because of what you've put in before, okay? So I say all of that because if you looked at life, and this is why I think, I like boxing, and I didn't even know that boxers thought that way, but it makes sense. Hey, I'm going to break it up into strategic segments. So if you look at life, you spend your really early days and years as a child and as a teenager, as a college student, man, this is the setup. You're learning, and then you kind of move into kind of your career, kind of the middle ages, so, and this is where you're starting to apply everything that you learned. And then you get into the shift where, okay, this is your kind of midlife crisis, that you only have kind of a quarter, kind of a quarter of your life to kind of live. And so now you're like, all right, man, I'm fatigued, kind of fatigued, but I got some hard knocks, but why do I keep going? What's my anchor? What's my why I'm in here? And then when you get to your final years, that's the championship rounds. This is where you're either going to finish well or you're not. And so if you can think through life, frame like a boxer, but understanding the purpose, like what is the purpose for which you are living, that's significant, because Rocky's key, Rocky is, he's very big on what's the purpose you're fighting for? What's the purpose you're fighting for? So what's the purpose you're living for? And then also keep in mind who's in your corner. Who's in your corner? Because you got to have somebody in your corner. And then ultimately making sure that Jesus is kind of in you, not just your corner, but in you. But you got to have those partners of peace that give you this calming presence in the midst of war. So that's what was kind of, I wanted to end each message talking about that, but I didn't have enough time to do that. So I'm like, listen, I'll wrap it up this way. But yeah, if you talk about your life as kind of these 12 rounds, but why are you living? Kind of why are you fighting? Who's in your corner? And then in some sense, what is your training ground? Like, this is part of where, church community, having a pastor that you want to speak into your life, that you believe challenges you, that believes, that God speaks through to make you better, you finding those partners of peace, those Christian brothers and sisters that can hold you accountable, reading the word, praying, spiritual disciplines of silence and solitude. Now, we'll look a little bit more. We'll look deeper into those areas in our series coming up in August and September. We're doing a series entitled "Under Pressure: Crushing Life Rather Than Life Crushing You." And and what's interesting is you see pressure and stress. They're two different things, but very similar. But you see both of them in these movies. And so, and that's where I think training, wilderness, all of that, community play such a huge role in making sure that we can not only get to the championship rounds of our life, but that we can finish well in life for the glory of King Jesus.
Sounds good. It's a great way to end it. Well, Northland family and friends, thanks for joining us for another episode of Extra Takes. It's always a blessing to have you here digging in. Thanks for that wave. Until next time, blessings.
Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Extra Takes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you won't miss a single episode.